Okay, so I've been getting a lot of requests on Facebook page and whatnot, YouTube videos of people wanting some different tuning stuff. One of the things that's been asked is acceleration enrichment, which I'm going to touch on in this video and pretty much explain what I know about it, how I know to tune it, and pretty much point you to another video that's already explaining in depth on how to do it. But more so, this video is going to be tuning basics, all right? So this is, you got a sniper and learn's not doing what you're wanting it to do, and because, well, learn only learns this fuel map. That's all it does, this base fuel map, all right? It builds out this learn table. So obviously it's only going to learn certain areas, and you'll have to manually touch other areas, and it's not going to touch anything else that this EFI system can do. So I'm going to try to go over that briefly and try not to ramble on or jump topic too much. I did a video out in my car that was a kind of a running session using this strip chart, which is this button right here. You can do the same thing. I've got a data log I've got pulled up that'll be pretty much the same, but the toggle strip chart will be a live feed, so you can live tune this. All right, so anybody that's wanting to do live tuning, it's actually somewhat easier for certain things. Other things, it's better to just go off a data log. So for live tuning, you'd hook your USB cable to your Holley on your CAN bus. If you have a splitter like I do, it's great. You can leave your touchscreen hooked up, and you can also live tune. You plug it in. This is offline right here. We'll have a button that says USB link. You'll click, and it's going to do a quick scan comparing what your ECU has currently, and what you want to do is click get from ECU, and that's going to pull in the running config more or less of what the car is running on at that moment. It's going to pull it in here. What I suggest you do right off the bat, if you see here, this config file is labeled backup. Go to file, hit save config as. You see I have a ton of them and I date all of them. Punch in Elena is the name of my car, by the way, in case people that don't watch my YouTube and don't know. So name the file something that you can differentiate, especially if you've got multiple vehicles. Date it, even though you have this modified date or create date, I'd still put a date on it, and then put it as backup. That way you have a hard copy of how it's running right now. You can do this on the handheld as well, but that'll store it on the laptop or however you're tuning it. You can I also suggest saving a copy on the SD card that's in the handheld as a backup in case you ever have any issues running. You can always load that config back that you know was drivable. So do that. After you do that, come here again, save config as, take the backup away. As you see, I've got that. Now I'm not going to load that one because I want to touch on a couple things that I modified from the backup to this version. So you want to save your backup as untouched, and you want to create another save as with just the date. And obviously don't hit cancel, and then this name will change up here. It'll say your new name. That way you're making changes to the new file and not to a sniper. Or not to the backup, sorry. So anyways, so you've got your config file open. Now I touched on this before. You can modify all these fields here. You can highlight. It's hard to see, but it actually does highlight all of these. Same thing across the bottom. You can change these fields to whatever you see fit. You can do things like punch in 600 and then punch in 6500 as a max, and then highlight all the way across, and then you can right click and fill row values, and it will average out pretty much the exact increments in between each number all the way to those numbers. I'm going to control Z that and undo my changes so it goes back. Now know this, control Z, which is undo, does not work for everything, so be careful. For instance, I want to say if you highlight fields here, you can use the control up arrow and down arrow to make adjustments. I want to say up arrow is 1% increase. Yep. and then left and right is 5% decrease and increase. Alright, Control Z does work there, but it won't go back all the way, I don't believe. There was something that Control Z won't undo, and I don't remember what it is, so be cautious. If you're making any changes like to this field, I would suggest if you're making like huge like whole fuel map changes, I was just saving a backup copy. You can always highlight this whole thing from another copy. You can open up multiple instances of Sniper software, by the way. You can highlight the whole field though. If you screw something up, Control C, Alt Tab to your other Sniper window and paste it all back in, right? It's not a bad idea to do. So anyways, so my map is not smooth at all. Obviously, you see, this dark blue field in the middle of nowhere. You see this patch of blue here. You see this random red spot, and then kind of going back to higher fuel maps. That's because if you go to my learn table, it doesn't touch on any of this, and it hasn't touched in some of these areas randomly. And the reason being is your learn is going to work off of a constant variable. So if you're revving the throttle or you're changing TPS rates, it's not learning during that time. If you go to your handheld and go to monitor, multi-gauge, I think it's AFR, it'll show your closed loop and learn status. The learn percent that it shows is not, thinking 0% is none learned and 100% is, oh, it's done learning, it's perfect operating, it's fully tuned. That's not how it works. The learn percentage is how much it's adding or subtracting from fuel. Now, so right now I've got this field right here is negative 7.3. That's what is it? I believe that's probably volumetric efficiency, which is what this is tuned on, I'm assuming. I don't know if this actually changes. Yeah, could be pounds an hour that it's actually showing there, that the learn table is subtracting. But anyway, so it's subtracting fuel from that field. Over here it's adding fuel. These are positive numbers. So what it's going to show is, I'm guessing, is a total value of all these numbers combined to show your percentage. I'm guessing. I want to say that's what it is. But anyways, what you're shooting for is a low percentage of change on the learn percent. Whenever it gets to where it's only showing within like negative 5% or positive 5%, you are close to being done with learning as far as the fields that it is learning. Now all these other white fields, it's untouched. You're going to have to manually tune those if you're hitting those. So if you're having and you're not going to be able to see this unless you data log. You're going to have to create a data log, drive it for a while, and you're going to have to make multiples. So like you go and you drive to work, data log it, name it something like home to work. And that's what I have. Let me pull one up. So I'll go to this. So you see my data log here. I have my house to gas station, my house to work, from gas station to my friend Drew's house. This was just a test run after I configured boost control. This is a default one that came with the Sniper. And these are dated ones from when I went to my dad's house. So name some data logs like this. You can go back to review. All right. So once you get that, you can come back, and when you have the data log open, I want to show you something. You see this yellow dot right here? That's where the data log is currently at, where I'm clicked. So if I click here and Alt tab back, right here. Come back to here. Now we're way up here because I'm in the throttle. All right, it's going to show you where you're at. And you can also go and do data log activate overlay. That's going to show you the pathing it takes during that whole data log. That's everywhere in this zoomed in section, that is. So I'm zoomed in. This little bitty white section is what I'm showing right here. This is a long data log or a big data log. But if you activate the overlay, it'll show everywhere every cell that it touched. All right. So if you're having issues in certain areas, or you remember, where you were having a stumble, or it was falling on its face, or you saw the AFR go lean or rich, you can go back to the data log. You see this AFR here. You can find where it's at. You can pull this field over. and it'll show you your min and max. And so, and you see my max was right at 18, which is pretty lean. My guess is that's where I let off the gas. All right, I let off throttle, and it was just the last bit of air going in, so it leaned it out. Not a big deal. So data log usage is very useful, and a bunch of people are afraid of it, or they don't know what they're looking at, more or less. All right, so that's going to take some playing with. There's several videos on YouTube that show you going through data logs. I'll touch on it in a second, but I wanted to show you, this learn feature doesn't do everything. These Holleys, they're sold as being, or these snipers are sold as being, self-learning. And what it seems like more so than less is stock motors seem to run better right out the gate with the Wizard. If you're a modified motor, you're gonna have to do some tweaking. You're gonna have to learn how to tune this stuff through the software. All right. So the main thing you're gonna need to do is, one, the handheld is more so for viewing. Don't tune on the handheld. All right. Get yourself a laptop, or get used to pulling that SD card repetitively, which is annoying. I strongly suggest getting a laptop or tablet or something. But tune with that. You have so many features you can get to in the software that aren't even available on the handheld. Acceleration enrichment is one of them. All right, so aside from this, by the way, this whole learn table, you can modify this too. So say this idle section doesn't need to be touched because you've already got it tuned perfect. Highlight it, delete, boom. It's not going to make any change now. You can actually come in here and do the same thing with the control up and down if you need to, and modify how you see fit, and then you just transfer learn to base and it sends it over. So you'd click that and it's going to ask you if you want to smooth. Now, a video I'm going to show you in a sec that is a YouTuber named Joe Simpson, does a lot of tuning stuff. He is an actual tuner. I should have said this at the beginning. I am not a tuner, right? I am someone that started with a carburetor and tried tuning it and tried learning how to tune carburetor, and I still couldn't get it perfect. I got to where I could get my car running good, but there were certain things I didn't like. So I wanted something that I could do more fine tune without having to swap parts. Because with carb, you got to change jets, you got to change accelerator pumps, things like that, cams for the accelerator cams. You got to actually change bolt-ons. With fuel injection, you just log into the software and make the changes more or less. Right? I wanted the more control and the more reliability. I wanted to be able to just key my car or my key over and it just fire right up and don't have to worry about a choke or anything like that. That's what I was shooting for. So, anyways, this other YouTuber, Joe Simpson, he is an actual tuner. I'm not a tuner, I'm self-taught. Everything I'm showing is stuff I've read, watched on YouTube, or watched videos on, learned through forums, through websites, etc. But from watching Joe Simpson, he has actually a video on this of why you do not want to smooth things automatically. So you would click no in this case, all right? The reason being is you saw some cells that were white. Up above is one number, down below is another number, and some of those are really far apart. And if that was 0 here, it's going to average between that and that to make this. So if this was 1 and this was 5, it's going to put like 3 right here. And this field didn't need to change. It was fine how it was. All right, so that's why my fuel map looks the way it is because I haven't been smoothing it. Now, once it learns a little more, I'm going to go in. If you go to graph, my fuel graph looks terrible. It's all kind of lumpy. I will go in here and manually smooth this out later. But right now, I'm just going to let the learn keep learning and doing its thing. I want to say I actually have an exhaust leak by my downpipe. By the way, I have a Turbo 302. So it's built motor and quite a bit modified. But I want to say my downpipe has a little bit of an exhaust leak that I have to fix. So I'm not really concerned so much with this. It's running solid, and it's not enough to cause a crazy lean feature. A crazy lean issue to make it start throwing fuel in it. So I'm just leaving it as is. All right, but anyways. So apart from your learn table, you have your target air fuel ratios. Now in here, I need to play up a little bit more in here because I feel like my idle at 14.5 might be a little bit too lean. I might bump it back to 14.3, maybe in around 14. I don't know. But you need to populate this target air fuel ratio table through this software, and don't use the basic idle, cruise, wide open throttle. It makes a terrible thing. This table right here is actually taken straight out of the V5 software. So Holley uses V5, V6 to tune the terminators, HPs, dominators, all the higher end like port injection systems. There is a Turbo 302, like 5-liter turbo, like Fox Body 50 turbo tune, which is where I got this from. I also used their spark table. I did modify this a little bit, and I did modify the spark table a little bit. I will say this as well. Do not take any numbers that you see in my tune to use for yours. Our engines aren't the same, our setups aren't the same, our cars aren't the same. They're not going to match. You're going to break something. All right? You can use it as a guide. Do not use the exact numbers. All right? So you want to set this something decent. You know, your cruise range is going to be somewhere over here. It's going to be in the vacuum. So if you're not boosted, you're not going to see any of this up here. Like none of that's going to be touched. The highest you're going to see is maybe 0.1 positive pressure. But your scaling is going to be different. I have mine scaled for my RPM range roughly and my boost range, which I'm not boosting anywhere near. I'm hitting this at the max. But you want something around 14.5, 14.7 for your cruise. All right, you don't need to be feeding fuel in that. Your timing is going to be high. You want to be as close to what is stoich or stoic, however you pronounce it, as possible, which is 14.7. All right, and then as you get into wide open throttle, where you're moving up, you're going to add more fuel. So your up here range is probably going to be a little bit fatter than what mine is, but I'm not having an issue right now at this. My car is running amazing at this setup, so that's what I'm leaving it as. All right. Another thing to touch on, if you have the upgrade of doing progressive linkage like I did, there's a couple things I touched on in another video where you have things you can upgrade to the sniper to improve functionality. One being a bunch of people have whistling issues. 1/4 inch 4-hole phenolic spacer fixes the whistle from everything I've read. All right, that's one thing. Another is progressive linkage. If you have it, you need to configure it, or it's not doing you a whole lot of benefit. You're actually kind of hurting yourself. You're going to be dumping way more fuel than you need to be. And the other thing is I actually have a throttle arm extender, which that just adjusts the fuel of the pedal. But anyways, to find this percentage, you're going to have someone look at the handheld, and you're going to have to rotate your throttle until it starts putting pressure on the secondary. And whatever that percentage is what you need to pump in right here. All right, click that, type that in. So next, we'll touch on acceleration enrichment here. So acceleration enrichment, you're going to have this main chart. And something I should have gone over right off the bat. So a bunch of people don't know or haven't actually taken the time to read the manual, which I haven't read all of it. I skimmed through it as I need to learn what I need. But you don't have to print it necessarily, but it wouldn't be a bad idea for people that aren't computer savvy. I have access to laptop, computer all the time, so I keep it on a PDF. But anyways, in the sniper software, they have that instructions manual on the Holley website, by the way, where on the actual product page. But if you don't have it, it's literally built into the software. So anywhere you're at, I'm on this acceleration enrichment page right here, this help button. You click that, boom, acceleration enrichment. Brings you right to it. All right. So several people always ask questions about, what does this do? How does this, different things are asking for information. This will literally, most of this manual will walk you through a majority of how to do things. Now, what I have highlighted here is one of the biggest things that I see people not doing, which is one, you need to only tune when the engine's at operating temperature. That's whatever your thermostat temp is. 160 is the default for the Holley. So by default, almost everything is at a flat rate once you hit 160, unless you manually adjusted it. 2, you need to only tune things or start making adjustments to all these other tables when the base fuel table is fully tuned. All right, mine's not. I've piddled with this a little bit, but I haven't gone in depth. So I've got some of it tuned a little bit, but like I said, I think I have an exhaust leak. So my base fuel table's never going to be right until I get that exhaust leak fixed, which is just has to do with a V-band flange not being aligned up right. And I try to make changes, I'm gonna have to go back and redo it once I fix the exhaust leak, right? So this watching online mode, that's talking about using the strip chart, right? But read this. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and read everything, but read this stuff. It will tell you how to do a majority of the tuning. I mean, it goes through and briefs on what everything is. All right, and another thing I found online when I was Googling about, so I made sure I wasn't quoting bad information on talking about the acceleration enrichment, is this for all you carb guys. If you want to pause the video right here so you can read this, this is just like a copy paste that I got. But this is a breakdown of what the acceleration enrichment terms are up here as related to a carburetor, right? And most of this stuff is what I was actually correct on. The only thing I wasn't positive on was the correction versus the rate of change, which I figured out. So these numbers are going to vary, and like the manual or the PDF says, you're going to just pretty much pop the throttle, and this line here is going to show you your rate of change. It will climb if you're on if you're actually linked. This will scale, and you'll have your strip chart open on another window. But as you're popping the accelerator or pumping the throttle, it's gonna move up this graph, and this little yellow bubble is gonna move across as well. So this I haven't messed with it a little bit. I actually tuned it back some because it was seeming a bit rich when I would tip in, and I think the reason for that is because I installed the progressive linkage. So now what used to be all 4 barrels opening at once, now I'm only opening 1 barrel up to 39%, or not 1 barrel but 2 barrels. So it's a whole lot less air instantly going in. So all these numbers need to actually tune back up until probably about 39%, a little bit. The other thing is this correction versus TPS. You're going to need to rescale this at the percentage roughly where it starts, which this graph is actually wrong. This was one of the things I changed from my from the backup to the other one. I didn't realize that I set this and then went back and realized that my TPS position actually opened a lot sooner. I was going off a base value. All right, so this is another thing I wanted to show you. By the way, this is Joe Simpson's video on acceleration enrichment. I highly suggest you go watch this if that's what you're wanting to tune. He goes over this really in depth and touches on it a lot. And long story short, it's going to take some playing with. There's no quick way to tune this. This acceleration enrichment is not something you're going to tune fast. But from what I've understood is it's something you don't have to tune exact. You can get it pretty close ballpark and you're not going to notice differences. Your AFR is going to be slightly off here and there, but you're not going to have a stumble. Like there's a good bit of a wide range of adjustment before you actually have issues. But you see how low this rate of change number is. Now granted, this is a different motor, so you can't use these numbers either. But you see the difference though is what I'm getting at. So I don't remember what car he's tuning in this video, but you see the difference in this versus what mine was this. All these numbers pretty much are the from Holley Wizard. I didn't touch these. The only thing I've touched is this. All right, so back to this. If you haven't made friends with EFI System Pro, you need to do it. You need to go here and you need to read a whole lot of stuff in this EFI section, like every readout in the Sniper Terminator X section. You need to just take your time and read through them. Several of these things apply to various things. Instructional videos, same thing. Watch their videos. So in here, they talk about how to configure progressive linkage. And boom, there you go. That's where the adjustable linkage chart comes from. And like I said, my numbers don't match these. This is just a ballpark figure they put in. I will probably go back and put mine closer to this because mine is actually a good bit richer than what this is showing. All right. If you use Google with like Gmail, like several people do, I suggest using the drive feature to store things. You can store your config files, data logs. I store the part numbers. I have a whole bunch of tuning information here that I've saved from PDFs and whatnot. It's a good place that you can access from, inside on a PC or a desktop to outside on a laptop when tuning when needed. So anyways, back to this. I won't go over acceleration enrichment anymore, but more or less do like what Joe Simpson's saying, data log, go to the strip chart. You're going to just, more or less, you're going to have to go from 0 to throttle, just pumping the throttle at whatever percent and see if you get lean spots or stutters. Then the crappy thing of what takes so long is you're not always going to be hitting the throttle from an idle. You're going to be cruising at 20% throttle going down the highway or the interstate, and then suddenly, car next to you wants to mess with you just playing that, only when you're in Mexico, right? So say you need to pass somebody, you're going to punch the throttle from 20%. Well, now you might get a stumble from this jump, so you need to adjust there. So on. That's what's going to take so long, and that's why I say it's best to go on a data log, because a bunch of these scenarios it's going to be hard to do because they're going to vary. And one of the things Joe Simpson says as well is you can't really mess with any of this until this is right, because more than not, it's this that's wrong and not this. All right? Because you might be hitting areas of vacuum that you are not under normal driving scenarios. So while you might be right here holding 20% throttle cruising on the highway, when you punch it, now you're suddenly, down here where you wouldn't be under a normal scenario or something. All right. So another thing you're going to want to do. Oh, so this smooth feature is what I was talking about earlier. You don't want to touch this. All right. Do not use this to smooth the entire thing, because that's how you wipe out things that you just did. So like this learn table you just transferred where it made corrections, you hit this smooth, suddenly it just wiped out half those changes and it's going to have to redo them. Now what you can do, and you have to be careful doing it, this is, I think Joe Simpson even labeled this being the lazy button, but you can actually highlight areas, right click, and then smooth selected. You can offset by a percentage, so say your idle area is running rich and you want to adjust this whole idle area, you can come and offset the selected by a percent value and it'll adjust that whole selected area. Things like that. So there's a lot of little neat tricks you can do with these that you're just going to have to play with and learn over time. Some of them I've picked up from different tips and videos, but get in the software and piddle around. The biggest thing is make a backup. And if you're doing live tuning, be careful, because the changes you make are instant. Like when you type in a number here, it goes. So if you're sitting here at, an idle and you want to adjust this idle area and you're trying to, maybe you're trying to hit control up arrow, control down arrow to adjust it, and then, oh crap, you just took all the fuel away instantly. And now your car's stalled. So yeah, be careful. So another thing you want to touch on is going to be the spark table. The basic spark table is, for lack of a better term, crap. All right. So you're going to want to make an actual 2D table, and Holley has a video on how to do this. This table was actually pulled from the V5, V6 software. Now there's tunes in those softwares that may apply to your build. They may not. They seem to have a whole lot of Chevy stuff. They don't have a whole lot of Ford stuff. It's mainly boosted or supercharged or nitrous or something like that. E85 builds. Pretty much drag race stuff. But I took this from the V5, V6, and then I scaled some areas back, like my cruise area. This area was all 40, I think, originally. Like all this was 40-ish. And I retarded it back a little bit because it seemed like I was wanting to get detonation while on the interstate in 5th gear at like 70, 80 mile an hour. So I tuned this back a little bit, and it seems to be running good. I might come back and try to advance it a little bit later. Someone said that maybe I needed more fuel, and that was my problem. But I don't know, my AFRs seemed good. So yeah, one of the things that I had wrong initially was I watched the Holley videos and thought, the 15 degrees idle or static timing that they say to set was what I needed my idle to be, and I was very wrong because sitting at, between 30 and 25 degrees timing, like roughly my idle is right around 28, 30 degrees. My throttle response is amazing now that this timing has increased. On top of that, it runs so much smoother. Like once I put this timing table in, it's like I had a whole new engine. It livened everything up compared to that base table. All right, so take your time, make this, smooth it out. My timing table is a little better. It does need some smoothing, especially in this little area right here, and then of course this weird drop that it has from the idle to where it falls off. So it could use a little bit of playing with, but it's a big drop from 30 dropping down to 25 here. But it seems to like it because it doesn't actually jump instantly 30 to 25. It varies it in between. So in between 900 and 1000 it goes back and forth a little bit to between 26, 27, 28, and so on. And then of course I have idle timing control as well. So a little touch on data log stuff. So with data logging, what you can do is you check these upper boxes to populate the lines. This lower box here is what puts this field here, and this can be scaled. You would just left click here, punch in the numbers for min and max values, which you want to scale these properly, so they'll show up. Now if you see I have negative numbers here and there, I have negative 100, negative 100 here, that's to get it off the bottom. So if you have it at 0, when it's at 0 RPM, you're not going to see this line, and it's hard to click on to follow it. So I punch in a negative number just so it raises this up just a hair. All right, but scale these to where they're valid values, or else you're not going to be able to do much. So in here you have different presets you can load, and you'd go to edit views to customize these. I just made a couple different ones. I haven't actually fixed these. I have on the laptop, but I'm on my desktop right now making this video, and I don't have a whole lot. I tried to just mimic what I do have for the AE tuning, which is acceleration enrichment, and the boost tuning from when I was setting up my boost solenoids for my dome pressure. But one thing that I will say is it is definitely a good idea to update the software and the firmware. However, I would not do it if you have a need for your vehicle, like an imminent need. It's like, say you have a car show the next couple of days from now or a week away. I wouldn't risk doing a firmware update or anything like that. Like, if you update the software, you have to do the firmware too if it's a decent deviation from like a revision update. If they changed versions, you'll have to have them matched or you won't be able to live tune across the two. But I wouldn't risk doing a firmware update to them if you have anything coming up that you need the vehicle for. The reason being is I work in the IT field and I have like I guess a fear of pushing firmwares. Firmware is sort of like a driver, a software driver more or less, for the unit itself. It's what the unit's software runs on or whatever. All right. So if for any reason it loses power or it glitches or whatever during that load, you could possibly brick the unit. All right. That's the risk involved. And if you brick it, I don't know if there's a way to recover it shy of sending it to Holley. Now, whenever I did mine the other day, it was wanting to act weird. I did the software, went in the file, did the firmware update, and it comes up telling you to pull the SD card and reboot. And when you do, that just loads the software to it, and then you have to go back in and actually apply the firmware through file, whatever. And it kept coming up where it couldn't see the ECU, and it wasn't reading the file on the SD. But I ended up pulling the SD card out, copying the files over once more, and going through the process again, and then it worked. So I had a slight scare, but it worked fine. So the nice thing about it is they fixed these three things. Before, this was custom sensor 1, custom sensor 2, custom sensor 3, and I always complained about why they couldn't take and I might have just froze it up. I don't know why when you click sensors, I think it does not like it. Oh, we'll let that sit. But anyways, so to make these changes, all you do is drag these over to this field, and then you can swap them, so on. All right, and then you just name them whatever you want to name them, and you hit OK. It's going to ask you if you want to save. Yes. You do the same thing in strip chart, except in strip chart, I think instead of clicking here and go to edit views, there's a little wrench right here. So that's all you'll do. And all you can do here is it's going to show you, your min and max, and you can drag this over. It's going to look like this when you get it. You can pull this over if you want to see the min and max, or you can give yourself a wider view of the main screen. But let's see, RPM is red, so you can click here, and you can use the left and right arrows to scale across. So there, this is where it was before I cranked up the car. There's turning it over. And boom, fires. Now, in this session, I actually tuned out my cranking fuel a little better. I have a video on that, and I want to touch on that a little bit at the end of this. So mine was not wanting to fire up right away. You can see there's the AFR. This is where it was firing, and it's right at stoic, and then it dips rich. Now that's what I want to touch on, is I was still sending too much fuel, because that is really rich, and then it fixes itself. It comes back, and it's starting to go through the coolant enrich right here. So let's change to fuel tuning. Oh no! Let's see, AFR, target AFR, and coolant, so there. Oh, actually this was at temp. So yeah, this is at temp, and here's my AFR. So yeah, this is up to temp, because all your numbers here are going to change on the left hand as you drag across, and you can see it at the top here too. So when it fired up, it went super rich, and then it's coming back. This is probably the after start hold, and then there we go. Now we're back to roughly the idle. It's slowly coming back up to the hold, and then we're pretty much spot on. Goes a little lean there. But yeah, you get the picture. There it is. Okay, I guess it did something weird. So see how, so it still doesn't show here for some reason. I don't know why. But anyways, data log's mainly where I wanted it to see it. So in here, this name field, it would just show custom number 1, 2, and 3 on the data log and the strip chart. Now it actually shows this name like it's supposed to. And I touched on this before, but you can buy 100 PSI sensors at low dollar performance, low dollar motorsports, something like that. Anyways, low dollar. Search them on Google, it should come up, and it's dollar with an ER. But you just buy their sensors because they're like, I don't know, a third of the price of Holley's, and you just configure the values. You just have to change this calibration curve down here. You have to change these voltages and these right here to match. I think it's the voltages. Maybe just change this number. Anyway, you have to change it on the calibration curve so it reads correctly. But a bunch of people don't know that in these sensors field, you have safeties. You can literally set safeties to turn your motor off or to cut ignition or whatnot if it has issue. So for instance, on coolant temp sensor, if it gets too hot, you can literally have your car automatically kill itself to prevent your motor from overheating. Alright. Obviously, it has RPM stuff, which you can configure back on the EFI tab, but same here. You can have it cut ignition. Obviously, it's probably not going to want to do anything for battery, TPS. Manifold air temp, maybe you want to do here if it's starting to feed risk, especially if you're turbo. Your temps are starting to get a little high and you're risking detonation. You could have it cut ignition. Manifold air pressure. If you overboost, if you're running boost, you can have it cut ignition. Same thing here. I'm running an oil pressure sensor. if I lose oil pressure, I can have it kill the motor. I also have a dome pressure sensor that's not as critical. That's for my my wastegate dome. And then fuel pressure. I have it set that if I lose fuel pressure, so to keep me from getting a lean condition, as soon as it detects a low fuel pressure, it's going to cut ignition. All right, and then when pressure's back up, works again. And this is also these sliders here, or these low cautions and high cautions, whatnot, warnings. This is where you go to adjust your handheld from showing yellow and red when it shouldn't be. If it's popping up yellow and you don't feel it's a reason to be cautioned or to be popping yellow, adjust it. You can change these values. You can change the colors. All right. I want to say this gauge panel can be customized. I don't remember. I want to say you can customize the handheld gauges in the software, but I'm not sure. You might have to do this in the handheld. That's something I haven't done yet and I need to do. So anyways, so startup enrichments. So this is where I went back and changed. So something I read online that I wasn't really aware of is you don't actually need this fuel prime. This needs to be tuned to where, like, all this fuel primed is an initial fuel shot when you key on. It primes the pump, which obviously if you check that, then that's the prime amount. But the I don't remember if this I don't think this fuel prime percent is like an amount of time that the pump primes, or this multiplier. I have to double check that. Let's see if it actually says. One more reading session. Did I miss it? Yeah, so let's see. Fuel prime percent is the multiplier that works with cranking fuel value in the startup enrichment table. Blah, blah, blah. And it comes with a default value of 150. Well, anyways, so what I've read was that your cranking fuel should be, I think they said 10% more than what your pound per hour is. So my base fuel, how much it's actually feeding pound per hour, which if I change the conversion, we're right around 5, 6, 4-ish. It's right around there. Now what I ended up doing was going into my data log and looking at this fuel flow. So add an idle. Which this is it coming down, so let's scroll over. It'll come back. This is roughly idle back here. It's a little high. Alright, sorry. Wireless headset died. So roughly at idle here, I'm sitting at right at 7 pounds an hour. So at the what I found the other day was, see, my running is right around between 160 180. So I found that I brought these down to 7-ish. And you can type here and hit enter, boom. So I set these to 7, I think. I think I raised this one up to about 8. and then I scaled all these back until they matched a little closer, like so. And then I unchecked fuel prime completely. And then just, instead of turning it on and waiting for the prime, because it's not going to prime, I just immediately went to cranking over. And after I made this adjustment, it literally fired as soon as I turned the key over. And I looked at my AFRs and they were just spot on. I didn't data log it when I did it. I was actually live recording it, and I decided not to upload that video because I had so many issues. And I made it a long video like I'm making this one a long video, but my AFRs after doing that were so much better. So much better. So I ended up saving this, and I came back to fuel prime because this fuel prime is literally just supposed to help wet the intake. So to give your engine just a little bit faster firing, because the cranking fuel doesn't kick on until it sees RPM. Alright, so this is more or less just to pre-prime the system, give a wet shot, and the fuel pump shuts off. So if it's anything like mine, my reg actually loses pressure almost immediately. It doesn't hold pressure for whatever reason. I don't have any issues starting my car though. But afterwards, I ended up turning this back on and playing with it and adjusting these numbers some. I don't remember what this fuel prime multiplier does. I want to say it's something to do with the wet shot as well. But it's like a scale of this percent of something like that. I don't know. I watched or read something on it a while back and I don't remember. So you'll have to research and see if you can figure it out. I think I ended up setting this to 125% and 3. And that was a happy place for mine with roughly this config. In fact, I can actually open it and look. No, I don't want to save any of those changes. So, oh, not that. We're gonna fuel, startup and ridge. Boom. So there's mine. That's what I came up with. 133 and then this. For my Turbo 302, this fires immediately now. Now that was for warmed up. I haven't fully tested the cold, so I might end up needing to adjust these back here. Granted, it's going to be probably around 60 to 80 at the coldest here. I mean, every once in a while we get freezing temps like 20 to 40, but the majority of the times when I fire up my car, it's 80 degrees out, if not closer to 100 degrees out. 80, 90, somewhere in there. Probably between 75 and 85. So you might want to play with this more so than what I did previously in my other cranking video, which was just playing with this and see if it helps. And then after, it has all these other adjustments you can do for after start holds, for enrichment and whatnot. Same thing for the temp enrich. Acceleration enrich has the same things. And you have, obviously you have idle stuff too. You have your idle speeds and your IX settings, which more times than not, I see this needing to be adjusted and these needing to be adjusted on people's vehicles because they have problems with idle, either stalling, coming off gas, and going out of gear into neutral or something, or coming up on a stop sign and wanting to stall. This is where you're going to play with that. My IX hold position is actually pretty low. I might bump that up later and play with it. Every once in a while, my IX acts screwy. I don't know if it's a faulty IAC or what, but mine wants to hang every once in a while. And I don't know if it's the sensor. Like it's not the throttle sensor, so it's got to be something with the sensor. But I haven't ever been data logging when it happens, so I don't know if it's some weird RFI thing. I don't think it is though, because I wouldn't think it would hold. I would think it would fluctuate. So I feel like I've got a faulty sensor that seems to act up every once in a while. It's not annoying enough for me to replace it yet. And then of course your park position for coolant temps. You're gonna need to play with those if you're having idle issues as well. So I think I've touched on everything tuning wise, what needs to be played with. The main things to focus on being, this target air fuel ratio, transferring the learn table, building a spark table, and then setting your progressive linkages, and then data logging and using your data log to help build out this fuel map. But yeah, if you have any questions after this video, if you stuck around this long, this is almost an hour-long video now. But if you have anything you're curious about or want to know about, ask away. Maybe I know, I can help. If it's something I've done or I can help with, I'll be glad to make a video on it, or comment, message, email, whatever, to help you out. Or if I don't know, I'll try to learn it and see if I can help you. But hopefully this video helps you, start tuning, get your feet in the water. But alright guys, I'll wrap it up with that. So thanks for watching, and if you want to see more, subscribe, I guess. Later guys.